Guys, welcome back to the Last Dance recap called The After Party. I'm Mackenzie Salmon, and of course we have B.J. Armstrong here with us on behalf of Mitchell and Ness. You can get all the Bulls gear you want on their website. We just saw episode 5 and 6. It covered a lot. So BJ, I do want to touch on Kobe, the Jordan Rules book, and the Knicks for a brief bit. So,
right.
So jumping right into it, Kobe, I want to start with Kobe because I think with the doc starting off with him, I don't know if like they had originally planned on starting that off or if it was like the tribute to Kobe or not, but being able to see that look into Kobe in the league, I feel like it was clear throughout Jordan's career that he was always set on, destroying his competition any way he could, but he kind of took Kobe under his wing in a sense, sort of passing of the torch. And BJ, I want to know from your perspective, what made Kobe different when you saw him coming up in the league?
Well, back then, Mackenzie, you got to remember, it was a different time. Most of the players in that era, most of us went to school for 3 or 4 years. So there was a learning curve that you had. Michael Jordan went to school for 3 years, Scottie Pippen, 4 years, myself, 4 years, Patrick Ewing, all of the players went to school and they kind of matured as players. The league was much older than it is now. We talk about Kobe Bryant and the wonderful career he had, but there was a maturity process that was needed because he came straight out of high school. And as I was watching that, I realized, because Kobe and I we shared the same agent at the time. Armstrong was my agent, and then Kobe Bryant, I think he came in the league right around 96 or so, if I remember correctly. So the one thing that as I was watching this, it just occurred to me that his learning curve was going to be on the job.
Yeah.
And he picked Michael Jordan to be his mentor. All of us went to school and Michael Jordan had 3 years to learn from Dean Smith, or you went to college and you learned from, all of the great coaches, playing, or you were lucky to have a mentor somewhere along your journey. Well, Kobe didn't have that. And then I thought, wow, you know what? That's interesting that Kobe had the curiosity to pick someone or pick a player that he was going to try to gain knowledge from and seek the information that was necessary if he was going to reach his true potential as a player. So it was just a different way. We all have to have a mentor. I played for a great college coach in Dr. Tom Davis. I was recruited by a wonderful man, George Raveling. And I just had great coaches along my journey, Hall of Fame coaches, Phil Jackson. And suddenly Kobe Bryant, it occurred to me that he didn't have that opportunity, but he was going to find it in another way. And he picked Michael Jordan to be his mentor. And he learned on the job, if you will. And it took him 3 or 4 years before he finally settled in to becoming the Kobe Bryant that we all loved and admired. But you know what? He had to figure out another way to do it because, he went straight to the NBA from high school.
In 1998, did it feel like there was that transitioning from the Bulls to what we see with what happened with the Lakers and Shaq and Kobe? Did you know that? Did it feel like there was a transition going on?
Well, back then, what I was able to know and I recognized was that there was a force in the league right there, that Shaquille O'Neal was that force. Shaquille was a true physical talent that was going to shift the power at some point during his career. You didn't know when it was going to happen. You didn't think, well, it's going to happen next year. You just didn't know when, but you knew it was going to happen because Shaq was a dominant physical force. And, he was a very imposing figure. Now, he had some gaps in his game that weren't when he first came in the league. He had to get better at shooting free throws. He had to get better at passing the ball. But you knew physically that this young man was going to shift the momentum of the league at some point during that time. So we all knew that. He was down in Orlando, and we knew that he was going to come into his own, right? He just needed time. He just needed time to learn how to play the game at that level. And once he went to LA, you kind of saw him develop. You saw him taking all of the steps, and then once he figured it out, he went on a run because he was the force that we knew that was going to take a shift in the league.
And BJ, another thing we saw was the birth of Air Jordan brand and his sneakers. And I want you to paint me a picture of how dominant Converse was, because in my mind, I'm like, what? When they said that,
yeah, no,
was like, how did Nike fit into that? Like, Converse.
Oh, yeah, you're too young. You didn't realize that we all played it. Those Converse cons that all of you guys walk around in them now because they look cool. Well, we actually played in those. I was one of those guys who played
in those?
I played in Converse cons. Oh, gosh. See, there you go. It's like, but you played Converse. That was the shoe of choice. And I vividly remember those commercials as a kid. I remember Magic Johnson had the Converse weapons, and then Larry Bird and Bernard King and Isiah Thomas. And all of the players wore Converse. That was like understood, right? You wore Converse. And then later on, I think Adidas somehow had the top 10 shoe. I don't know if you remember that shoe. There was a top 10 shoe that everyone used to wear. And, no one wore Nikes. Nike was it was like a running shoe, right? And so I remember those times, Converse that was the shoe of choice. All the players back then, we wore Converse. You wanted to be like Magic or Larry or Bernard King, whoever your favorite player, but that was the shoe that you all wore. And it's pretty funny, and because my son asked me the same thing. He's like, "Dad, they wore Converse?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's like Converse." Like you mean Nike wasn't always Nike? No, it wasn't. They actually started somewhere, and so yeah, I remember those days, and everyone wore Converse, believe it or not.
And it was crazy because I know they touched on this a bit, but it seemed like Jordan became this spearhead of the crossover between sports and urban culture, and then it became international. What was it like for you to see this happen? Because I don't even think Nike was really prepared to sell that much, because I mentioned they wanted to make like $3 million in the first year or something, and they ended up making like 100 or something crazy like that.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny, it's funny to watch and hear the stories, and then the legend grows. The truth of it is no one had ever sold a shoe before. So why would this one actually work?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so we're going to give this guy a signature shoe. Like, who's going to buy a shoe? Like, there was no such thing as like, streetwear. There was no such thing as like, you didn't wear your sneakers with fashion. That wasn't a thing back then, believe it or not. And let alone, who were you selling it to, right? There was just a very small audience of people who actually would wear sneakers, with their clothes and what have you. When Jordan shoe really took off was when the NBA banned the shoe, because if you look at the shoe, it had to have a certain amount of like, I think it was like white, I think was the color. You can only have a certain amount of like color on the shoe, and it had to be the color that your team. And Jordan's shoe was actually banned. And once his shoe was banned and Nike decided to pay the fine, that's what brought about the rebellious attitude of all of the youth. That's the truth. So people really liked to wear the shoe because they were like, all the guys in the suit said you can't wear them. So guess what you do as a teenager? Well, I'm going to wear them just because. So it was like I'm rebelling against like my parents, right? And I'm just going to do this just because. And I mean, I think the fine was like, I don't know, $200 or $500, which is nothing. So Nike was like, sure, we'll pay the fine and we'll get publicity for it. What can that hurt? And the guy will go out there, and then all of the kids are like, yeah.
Be like Mike.
Be like Mike, right? I'm rebelling against all of the guys in the city. I'm rebelling against the adults. So that was the part. They didn't touch on that last night. Maybe, Nike doesn't want to, really let them know how it really started. But that's how the game really started. You wore the shoes because this guy was rebelling against, quote unquote, the league. And that was a part of the story that no one talked about. At least they didn't touch on it last night.
The fine part, yeah. And in the middle of Jordan building this shoe empire, and I know he did some McDonald's commercials that showed and different sponsorships, but what we saw with the 1992 Olympics and the Dream Team What was that like for you to see that Olympic run play out and how it gave NBA this clout in the face it does today? Because before that, NBA players weren't a part of that.
Well, that was a great, and I really wish they probably could do a whole. They probably could have touched on that for at least a couple of episodes, because that was the first time I think the league knew that it had something. We didn't know what we had, but we had something. And the growth of the game and the popularity of the game, and there was interest from the game on a global level. So back then, I had the funny thing about that whole story as I was watching it about the 92 Olympics is I first met Tony Kukoc and Dino Raja and Vlade Divac in high school, like in 1984, 85, somewhere around there. We played in this thing called the Albert Schweitzer Games in Mannheim, Germany, of all places. And I remember I met this guy. He was left-handed, and they called him the waiter. And that was Tony Kukoc. And so Tony and I knew each other back then. The late Drazen Petrovic was on that team, Vlade Divac, Dino Raja. So it was like 4 or 5 guys that ended up playing professionally on that team. And what I remember most about Tony was that Tony had he was like 6'10", and he was playing point guard position. And his interest in the game was growing. They was no longer like they were just intimidated by us, but they were like, they felt comfortable playing against us. And that was like my first time. I was like, oh, these guys can really play. And now answering your question in 92, what did that mean? I think the game itself was growing, and the NBA saw an opportunity to grow the game and really grow the game, because financially it only made sense that you had players from back then. It was Yugoslavia. Tony was from Croatia. I think Vlade was from Serbia. And you had all of these wonderful players. I first played against Arvydas Sabonis like in 87, somewhere around there in like Moscow. I played against him. And I remember seeing this athletic guy that I had been hearing about. He was like folklore. He was like this 7-footer from like Russia who could run and jump and athletic. And I remember I played against him with David Robinson. This was I want to say, we were getting ready for the 88 Olympics. I was trying out for the 88 Olympics. And that was the last time that amateurs are playing in the Olympics, was in the 88 Olympics. I didn't make the team. I was like one of the last players cut to make that team. And we played against Arvydas Sabonis. So I saw all of these players before, and you saw that they were watching us. And when I say us, they were studying the game.
So cool.
They were studying the game. So I had many of these players that eventually came over and played. And when Tony came over, we had already had a relationship prior to this that went back. I think he came over like 10 years later or something like that. And so, I saw the maturity, I saw the growth of the game. And what Michael did and that dream team did is they suddenly, now those were guys they were looking at on VHS. You're too young to remember that. Those
I VHS.
VHS, right?
Yeah, I'm on VHS.
Oh, you are? Okay. So back then, you would take the tape, and those guys would probably get the game on tape delay. So now suddenly, that was the first time that the rest of the world had a chance to play against their heroes, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. These were all the guys who they grew up in the 80s watching play. And suddenly they're playing against Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing. And that was the first time the rest of the world was on the same court. And that's why it was such a big deal. And now you're seeing these guys, Dirk Nowitzki and Peja and all of those guys coming over, because now they was like, okay, we played against the best. And now they had something to take back. And now they're coming over with the confidence. So it was great. It was a great business decision for the league. And I definitely understood it then. I understand it now. And now you're seeing so many wonderful, you see Giannis, and you seeing,
international players,
Porzingis and Nurkic and, Jokovic and all of the guys coming over now. So it only makes sense that it was just a matter of time when it was going to happen. And 92 was kind of that was the trigger that really got everything moving in the direction that you currently see.
Yeah. And for the second week in a row, too, the topic of Isiah Thomas not making the dream team came up. Clearly, I think the doc wanted to drill down on that because it was such a hot topic. And regardless of X and O's, chemistry is huge in the game of basketball. Why do you think they kept going back to that like he should have made it, but the chemistry was off. You know, a lot more goes into just being a good player.
Well, I think it's, it's a hot topic, right? I think it makes for good theater. It makes for good television. And, there has to be, if there is a hero, there has to be someone that you, so look, Isiah Thomas, make no doubt about it, was a spectacular, spectacular player. Yeah. He had the utmost respect of everyone who played against him, regardless of what you thought about him, whatever. That's on you. What we understood was he was a phenomenal, phenomenal player. And without question, there were a lot of players that, that probably felt behind scenes they should have been on part of the team. But Isiah Thomas clearly had the resume, clearly was one of the best players. And that's a tough decision. And it is what it is. I wasn't there. I don't know the decision. But there were, you talk about one of the things I remember thinking this myself was Christian Laettner was unbelievable. Yeah. He had an amazing, amazing career, college career and professional career. Yeah. But I remember thinking, God, that guy Shaquille O'Neal, he could probably be on that team too.
Yeah.
He was like a collegiate player at the time. And I remember thinking like, God, that guy is pretty good too. So there was always these players that you're thinking if you're going to have a player or what have you, because there's always an argument who's the best. But when you're putting together a team, that's a totally different conversation. So it doesn't make it right or wrong, and someone had to be left off. And unfortunately, the guys who didn't make it, it is what it is. And you move on. And, like I said, that's one of the hot topics that continues to be hot some 30 years later.
Exactly. And I thought it was so funny too in the doc when it showed them in practice and they were like, smack talking each other, and then they get on the bus and then someone cracks a joke and they're like, that was the best practice we've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, that was, it's funny because, that's how we really acted back then, right? It was all about the spirit of competition, and you were constantly evaluating how good you were and how good you could be, and you wanted to find out. And it's not like it is today. You were constantly testing someone, and you wanted to see. And I'll tell a quick story here. And I remember before he and Scotty were going to the Olympics, and he was getting ready to go. And I remember he was like hooping and hollering a little bit. Oh, we just got done playing. Do I really want to go? And it is what it is, right? So I was like, so we were talking, and then suddenly it turned to like, what are you going to try to accomplish when you go? And one of the things he wanted to accomplish was he wanted to make sure that everyone there knew that he was the best player there. Jeez. Like, so he didn't go there with the idea of like, I'm going, oh no, I don't want to be here. If you know him and you understand him, he always has a process and a way to think about something. And he was going there with the idea, if I could go there and establish myself as the best player in the world, that will give us the best opportunity to win the following season, because all of the best players will know that I'm the best. And so he took it upon himself to be in great shape, right? You don't just show up and be able to be the best without being prepared for that moment. He went there with a purpose. And the purpose was, if we were going to win the championship in I think it was 93, I believe, if we were going to win the championship, he wanted to make sure that he established his dominance there and make sure that all the players there knew that he was the best player in the world and that no one else would even argue that point. So he had a plan. I remember us talking about it, and he just kind of said it. And I was like, okay, it's interesting. It's an interesting way to think about going to the Olympics in 92. Yeah. Everyone else is talking about, oh, isn't this great collection of team? And he was going there to make sure that Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Patrick Ewing, and all the other guys, that they knew when that Olympic event was over that he was the best player, because he was already laying the foundation for the following year of why we were going to win the championship. And and he achieved that. So him having a great practice was not an accident. He just didn't show up and be all of a sudden he was ready for that. He was waiting for that. He was prepared for that. And he wanted to make sure that everyone else knew that, because, he was always attacking your thoughts. And he always, he would say things, and I would think about it. He was like, he knew where change took place. It always took place in the mind. So he was always attacking your thought process, because he didn't want you ever to believe that you had a chance to beat him.
Yeah, that competition part of him.
Well, I don't even know if it was competition. It was just, he just understood that when you're playing and you're competing against people, if you can put doubt in someone else's mind, that gives him an advantage, because he had superior confidence. Make no doubt about it. The man's confidence in his ability, doesn't matter what. And you can watch it last night. He's playing whatever Nichols or whatever they're playing. And there's never a doubt that he thinks he can win. And even when he wins, he's like, oh, you only won because, you know what I mean? Exactly. He never loses. He never loses. Like, that's the one thing about him. Like, even when you beat him, he's like, well, you only win because your thing rolled, you didn't beat him. So his confidence level, that's just who he is. And it's always funny to see it, because you see all these other people get sucked into the game.
Yeah. And what was crazy too is how they mentioned the Jordan rules book. I didn't even know about this book. I think when they mentioned it being like the first kink, and Jordan isn't this perfect guy that everyone thinks he is. And BJ, I want to know, did you read the book, and how did it change the team dynamics?
It took some time for me to read. The book. I didn't read it when it initially came out. And that was the first time that, that in our locker room, that was our safe haven, right? That was, nothing came into our locker room. And that was the first time where they didn't get the story all the way right, but it was close enough to where everybody was like, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Okay. That was the very, very first time. So, and I knew that, everyone in the locker room knew that, and we were aware that, okay, now we know that people are trying to get at us from all different angles. So it kept us on our toes. It kept us alert. But in the end, it was one of those things that, once again, our team rallied around it. We figured out how to overcome that, and we moved on. But certainly that was the first time that there was even half of the story was right. And so we knew that something was going on, and it did force everybody to kind of like look around a little bit to say, okay, what's going on? Yeah, it wasn't even who's talking. It was like, okay, like, this is our space. And it forced us to make a decision. And that's the one thing that you learn about a team, or you learn about business, or you learn about anytime you're in a group. You either got to be all in, or you got to be all out. So it was like one of those things. Life was just going great. We won in 91. Yay. Won 92. Yay. 93. And all of a sudden, okay, wait a minute. We have to stay sharp.
Yeah.
We have to, okay, are we all in, or are we all out? And then that moment was like, okay, we're all in, but now let's really hunker down, do what we have to do. But I remember the book. I didn't read it till much later, years later, actually, where I read it. And I was like, that was interesting how the information did get to the book, but it was nothing that was going to break us up. And I think it was John Paxson who said it last night. We were always going to rally around our guys. Those were my brothers, those were our brothers, and regardless of what was going on. But it did kind of, a little turbulence there for a little bit, but we were able to get ourselves together and get back on track.
I was gonna say, did Michael address it ever in the locker room, or was it just kind of like everyone kind of knew about it, and it's like, did you read it? No, but this is what it.
Well, it was getting a lot of attention, and it was touched on. I think the big picture thing, the big news, or the big picture for all of us, was this was the first time we were this team where everything was like just going along, right? We was just going along to plan, right? We had a plan, we set out what we were going to do, and it was just going, we were just going along. And then suddenly all of us had to come to the realization that the burden of what it meant to be a superstar, the burden of popularity, and we were all faced with this. We all had to take accountability to what we said, not only to the media, but things could be taken out of context. And it was kind of like one of those things that really was eye-opening to all of us. And then Michael took all of the responsibility for us in every interview, right? If something was going on bad with the team, they didn't ask BJ, they didn't ask John Paxson, they would go right to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Suddenly now it had turned. Michael Jordan needed us. That the lesson for all of us was, you got to be careful what you ask for, Mackenzie. Everyone wants to be a star, right? Everyone wants to be the hero or the leading actor of a movie. Yeah. But that responsibility, I don't wish on anyone, because having to be turned on to that degree every single day, that's work. And you can lose your sense of self. And what we did was, it was easy for all of us to just go about our job, because the media would come in, I would just sneak out, go around and do my little thing, show up and play. But every day, Michael had to be a star. And he couldn't just be a star. He had to be a superstar.
Yeah.
He had to answer that question. And it was like, oh, we forgot. We forgot about Michael. Like Air Jordan was fine, but we forgot about Michael. So we had to reach back, come get him and say, okay, bring everybody back into the group, re-energize ourselves, and then move forward, because we had forgot one of our guys, because we were all just so used to him being this Air Jordan character. Yeah. But Michael was being, he was thrust more in the background now. And while all of us were going out to lunch and doing things, Michael was in the room. Hey, MJ, let's go downstairs in the lobby and grab lunch or whatever. He couldn't do that anymore. He couldn't go to the movies anymore. He couldn't just take a walk outside anymore. Yeah. And that was the reminder that we needed. And then when that book came out, and then it was like, okay, we were back to doing things that we normally do. Like, you check on your guys. Yeah, hey, M, you good? You need anything? We about to go out. We know you can't go out, but no, I'm okay. So those little things is what brought us back together, because now he couldn't do any of those things. And that is what superstardom brings you. It brings you other things, but it takes away others, other aspects of your life. And, I wouldn't want to be in a hotel lobby, 100 days in a hotel room and just sitting around, laying on the couch, smoking a cigar. That's not my thing. Right? That's not what I call that's not my thing. Yeah. Okay. One day. Okay. But every single time, I'm not running to the hotel lobby or running to my hotel room just so I can just stay there. Yeah. No, that's you got to have some other activity. So that's one thing that was one positive that came out of that. But certainly, like I said, it was like a little, we were very aware of what was going on.
And I think going off that too, I think you would agree that this documentary has been really good at using a certain moment in time or a playoff series to tell the deeper story. And I know in this case, using the 93 conference series finals against the Knicks, great series to tell a bigger story of Jordan. And they brought in the whole gambling aspect. And he mentioned it being stemmed from him being so competitive. Do you think that this was like the media buffing it up more than what it was supposed to be? Or did you think that Michael should have maybe not been gambling in the middle of the series?
Well, I was talking to someone
different now than it used to be.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine from college earlier today, coming over, and look, the reality of it is this, professionals, nothing prepares you for professional sports. Everyone has a way of preparing themselves for a game. Everyone deals with stress in a certain way or a different way. But in the end, do you get the results that you're looking for? Michael Jordan's preparation was totally different than my preparation. And my preparation is different than Scotty. But in the end, when we got there, we had a job to do, and you try to do your job. The only thing that bothered me about that was that some people can function in that space.
Yeah.
That's Michael. Michael can function in that space. Now, to most, no one wants to rock the boat, right? So, as a kid, right, I remember, my high school coach would say, BJ, you want to get your proper rest. And BJ, you want to eat right. And all of these things, right? Teaching all of the things to be a good teammate. And I took that to heart. When I got to the NBA, you throw that out the window. Wow. Because now you got to perform. And whatever you did, you got to make sure that you perform at 7:30. And who am I to tell you how to get ready for a game? That's what people couldn't understand, is that Michael Jordan's preparation, like, how could he do that? You're not supposed to be able to do that. You're supposed to go to bed by 10 o'clock and eat your Wheaties and get your proper rest and
greens.
Get your salad. No. Now you have to do what you have to do to get yourself ready, whatever that is. That's called a professional. So people couldn't comprehend that he was, his preparation was totally different. This is what I came to understand about Michael. The more things that was going on around him, the better he was going to be. So secretly, we were like, this is great. This is great because
Scottie Pippen going to Vegas.
Yeah, because he was disruptive to himself. And, I to be a champion, you have to understand what I'm about to say here. You can never trust being happy if you're going to be a champion. If you're going to reach the level of success that is a world champion in basketball or whatever it is you're doing, you can't trust happiness. I can't trust being okay. I have to keep myself on edge. And however you need to get there, you got to do what you got to do. So you better be disruptive to yourself before someone else is. Michael's preparation was far different than mine because the problems he faced in the game was totally different than the problems I faced. Therefore, I had to be respectful to him. He had to be respectful to me. But in the end, at 7:30, make no doubt about it, he was going to be ready for that game. And that's what people couldn't understand. And I get it. Like, it does look like from the outside. But as a professional, hey, man, you do what you got to do. If that's how you relax, because we all need to get our minds off the game. You can't just sit there in your room in New York City and just like, there's no way you can do that. So good for him. Good for him. Good for him. I'm just upset I wasn't invited. Why wasn't I invited? You guys
were on the plane betting dollars. We saw that.
Why wasn't I invited? But no, you do what you got to do, and you respect people's preparation, and no one can deny that. And like I said, more things going on around us, the better we were.
Yeah, and I think these last few episodes was kind of crazy. The episode 5 and 6, it kind of went in on Jordan and his character, was put into question. Do you think the documentary did a good job of depicting him like that, or do you think it was a way, to kind of put this image on us of what Jordan was behind the scenes?
As I watch him, and there's so many characters, right? And I think I told you at the beginning when we first started, I'm nervous because for him, it's because when you know someone, right? I know Michael, right? Now we're looking at this Air Jordan character, and then we're looking at, all of the characters that he took on and responsibility. But are they portraying him fairly? I think this is just a glimpse. I think it's just a glimpse because professional sports it's a different animal, and it's not really sport. It's not really entertainment. It's some type of hybrid that we are watching here, right? Like when you watch the documentary, it's like entertaining to people. People are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that happened. Oh, wow. Like you guys were infighting. You guys had all these things going on. And then, oh, by the way, there was a game. And how did you win? And when all of this is going on, it's like this. So it's like funny to watch because that was just your life. That everyone dealt with this. That was the world that we all lived in. That's the world that we all signed up. So for us, it was just kind of normal. But to hear the response, people are like, "Oh my!" Like they're like, "This is drama," and this is like, yeah, like you guys were playing cards and gambling, and this guy went to Vegas. It was like, no,
You're like, okay, cool.
yeah, like this is we're human. We do things. You're like, you don't just sit around in your uniform all the time. Like, and no one has said this, but I wanted in one of the episodes, you saw Michael Jordan folding up his uniform.
Yeah.
People didn't realize that we used to have to wash our own uniforms when I first came in the league.
You had to wash your own uniform.
Yeah, like so I want some credit for like having to wash my own uniform. Things you had to do, like people like, yeah, no, like your response would be like, you had to wash your own uniform. Wash your own uniform. Yeah, we used to have to wash our own uniform. So like after a game, and you would like say back to back, you would have to run home, wash your uniform so you could be ready for the next.
Change that. What?
You have to carry your own shoes, So if you ever watch a tape, I'm gonna give you a little homework. If you ever watch a tape of an old game, guys didn't warm up with their warm-ups on. And those were always the guys who were lazy because they would smell so bad, right? So you were either lazy or you weren't married at the time, right? You weren't married. So you said normally you weren't married. So you had no one. So it was like, man, I can't go home and watch. There was no mom there. So if you ever go on the road, especially on the road, you have to figure out how to wash your own uniform. So if you watch that episode, Jordan is actually folding up his own uniform.
Whoa.
Because that's what you did. Like you actually, you were like self-sufficient, right? And yeah, people just want to like, you mean you actually just didn't live at the arena? No, you actually had a life and you did these and you went about your daily activities. So, it's kind of funny. Like your response just like cracks me up because they're like, can't believe, Dad. My kids were like, Dad, you actually washed it? Yeah, I washed my own uniform. Who else was going to wash that uniform? So that was one of the things I found kind of funny. My humor in watching this documentary.
Yeah, and I know we have one fan question I want to ask you before we close. Noreen asked, she said, how did you handle all the media frenzy behind everything we're seeing? Because I'm sure you've gotten your media frenzy aspect.
Yeah, when I learned, that this was coming out, and I just wanted to make a commitment to the next generation.
Yeah.
That what. It's great to see your reaction. It's great to see my own kids' reaction because the things that I just did, you never think your life is your life. My life's not exciting. Who cares about me, right? I go home after a game. I wash my uniform. That's not exciting, right? I wanted to be doing what I thought, an NBA player should be. Well, no one told me that that's what NBA players do. You play and you go home and you wash your uniform, right? I didn't get that part of the memo. I just, it was just part of what you did, just growing up and playing and learning how to live life. And, I didn't know anything. I was just a young kid, just trying to figure out who I could be and what I could be. And the thing that I learned most is what I thought was going on was different from how it really was. And that was the eye-opening experience. Because as a kid, I had this dream of what it meant to play in the NBA. And I dreamed about, I was just like any other kid. I was in my backyard dreaming 3, 2, 1. I was going to make the last shot and I was going to be the star player. And then suddenly I got to the NBA and I had this eye-opening experience is that this is a business. It's a job. And that was the one thing that really was just eye-opening to me is that, we have this, imagination of what's it like to play in the NBA. And that's what makes me laugh watching this now and watching your reaction and watching because they can't believe it. They just can't believe it.
So cool.
But I made a commitment to do this because I wanted to share with the next generation and give them a sense that, no matter what's going on and all of these things, if you can learn anything from this documentary, is that the game of basketball remain first and foremost in all of our lives, right? We didn't play the game. Michael Jordan was the greatest star, the biggest star, but him being an NBA star wasn't the goal. He wanted to be a great teammate. He wanted to be the best player he could be. And he stayed true to that throughout this entire process. So I felt a real sense to help the next generation to pass this on. I couldn't think of a better person. I think Michael was the one who had to say this. He had to do it. And then all of us will chime in because we were there to witness it. He was really that good. Like, you know, it's like, I love it when they, like all of the young people that I know, they call me like, man, I didn't realize he was really that good. Yeah, he was really that good. Like, I'm not making this up. He was really, Did he really practice that way? Yeah, he really did practice that way. So I felt a sense of responsibility to make sure that the next generation of great players, that they could hear it, because it's difficult to play up here. It's difficult to achieve the play in the NBA. You know, and the one thing is, these are other NBA players talking about another NBA player. These aren't like just anyone. You know, you're seeing, you know, like Charles Barkley said last night, I played the greatest game I've ever played. And then this other guy just comes up and he's even better. Like Charles Barkley was the MVP of the NBA, saying that it was this other guy who was just that much better.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like, wow. But he saw the same thing I saw, because Charles Barkley was incredible that year. He was a man on a mission. And then Jordan just like, okay, you're here. I'm going to go here. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that is what makes him incredible, because you're seeing other Hall of Fame players saying Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Patrick Ewing. I mean, these are like
legit.
Yeah. So, I mean, so to see your reaction is the responsibility that I feel that all of us have, to like to say, yeah, it's real. This guy was real. That's a fictional character. And he actually, he was better than advertised. So I felt the need to do it, and that's why I'm doing it.
I love that. And the last question, I know you briefly touched on it, with Jordan kind of hitting that wall, sitting in the, it was a hotel room smoking, and he's like, you know, I don't wish this on anyone. I'm kind of done. Do you think these next few episodes are going to focus on that third, you know, championship, hitting that wall, kind of like he's done?
Well, I think every athlete is faced with his own mortality of who you are as a player. And, you know, we all get to that road where you come into this league, you're athletic, you can run, you have the stamina, you're strong. And then suddenly, you know, you play in that back-to-back game and you go, oh, wow, I don't have it tonight.
Yep.
And I think the genius of Michael Jordan was when he came into the league, he was all those things. He was athletic. He had this athleticism, this exuberance, this innocence about him. And then suddenly he was a totally different player. So I think the second act of Michael Jordan is, to me, is what they're going to focus on, because 96, 97, 98, he was a totally different player. He was a totally different player. But he achieved the same results, but he recreated himself.
Yeah.
It's like, it'll be like, I remember when Tiger Woods won his first, you know, whatever, his first Masters or whatever. And then he changed and he changed his swing. And everybody's like, why would you change your swing? Like, you're Tiger Woods. Well,
because he's that good.
Well, Michael knew that if he continued to play the way he used to play, he couldn't achieve the success at the level that he wanted to achieve it. So he recreated himself and played a totally different way to get the same results that he was looking for. Now that is like when he was doing it. And I remember, you know, he would talk about it and we would talk, and I was on other teams and we would work out in the summer. And I was like, wow. Well, I was just as interested to see the second act as the first act, because the first act was pretty darn good. But the second act, to watch him shoot fadeaway jump shots.
You're like,
watch him,
what is this
guy go doing? And to figure out how to do that, how he knew he wasn't the same athletic player, and he would pick and choose his moments in the game and the time and the score and how he was managing the game, and he wanted to make sure he got Scotty going and all this other. That to me was just as impressive, because we all are faced with that. And that's what we call, you want to age gracefully as a player, right? Some players you'll see here and then you'll just see them take a dip, right?
Yeah.
Once Michael Jordan, he aged gracefully. He was just like, oh, wow. And he would show you glimpses of dunking, but he just wouldn't do it as frequently as he did earlier in his career.
Yeah.
There were more layups. There were more fadeaway jump shots. There were more shot fakes, right? He even made a shot fake. He would take it because he had those big hands. He would take it. He would do it like that, and everybody go, "Oh gosh!" And I was like, "You're not even moving now." That's like the old man game, right? You take it. That's the old man game. You take it and you do like that, and everybody go, "Oh, did you? That's great." Well, so he was recreating himself and working with where he was at physically, but he was still able to achieve that, the results that he was looking for. And to me, that's genius stuff, right? That's how you have fun. Something that you do over and over again, and then you recreate it and you come up with something that looks entirely different. And that's what he did. And it was great to watch. I still, when I was on other teams, I still wanted to beat him like everyone else. But, I was on both sides. I was on both sides of that. I was on this side. But back then, there was no texting. See, it's not like, letters. Like, yo, no, you didn't write anything. You didn't say anything. So, so if you didn't say anything, so you would go and you would play, and then he would look down at me and I would look down at him, and we wouldn't say anything. They were like, "Oh, man, I thought that was your boy. I thought that was your guy." You'd be like, "No, you don't understand. There's a game going on here. You don't talk. So you don't talk. You don't talk to the guys you're trying to beat. That was the mindset back then."
I love that. Thank you so much, BJ. It's always so much fun talking to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Enjoy. And I'm looking forward to 7 and 8. You guys are pointing things out to me now that I just kind of took for granted.
So much in these episodes. And I'm sure they're going to end up talking a little bit about his dad, the baseball hiatus that you talked about too. So I can't wait.
All right, then. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.